Easton. I have a little website in town called campaplanet.com and a little music site called reactsmusic.com. I'm a recovering newspaper guy. I used to be involved with the Creative Loafing newspaper, the Weekly Planet. And I just basically kind of facilitating a conversation here between a couple of friends in the Wiki community. And there's two big there's two big Wiki platforms out there, Wikipedia and then sort of a newer one to the party, Tiki Wiki. And we talked a little bit yesterday. Excuse me. Speak up. Is that it? Okay. So we talked a little bit yesterday about Tiki Wiki. And anyway, two friends that I thought would be a good conversation to, and I guess at some level it's sort of a repeat of a conversation that I had with, this is Brad Patrick. Brad lives in Tampa and is a lawyer and technology lawyer, but I guess you do a few other things on this, no divorces and stuff like that. But anyway, Brad was the general counsel for Wikipedia. He was the number 3 employee there and was the interim executive director and sort of helped recruit Sue, what's her last name?
Gardner.
Sue Gardner, who now runs Wikipedia. A lot of you guys probably know that Wikipedia was actually started in St. Petersburg, or actually operated here for a few years and just moved to San Francisco. And Mark Laporte is from Montreal, and so has been involved in Tiki Wiki for about 7.5 years. Is that I got that right? So actually, Wikipedia and Tiki Wiki are roughly the same kind of age. Is that right?
Wikipedia will be 10 years old this January.
And how old is Tiki Wiki?
It's going to be 8 years old in October.
8. Okay. So so anyway, sort of a question. I think it's what brought me to have these conversations was a decision tree that which wiki site do you use? What are the pros and cons of Wikipedia? Wikipedia has some free open source software called MediaWiki, and then Tiki Wiki is also free open source. And without sort of going into a lot of conversation, there was really a choice. The Tiki Wiki has got a lot more features than the Wikipedia MediaWiki has, and Wikipedia is a little bit more sort of encyclopedia based, and I guess Tiki Wiki is a little bit more community based. So anyway, that's what sort of brought me into this conversation. But it's actually a far richer conversation than that, and we thought we'd sort of put this on today, which is Mark and Brad wanted to meet each other because Brad had lived through this tremendous growth stage, I guess, and just was telling some real fun stories that we thought would I'd sort of light him up a little bit and sort of talk about. And then Mark is starting to experience that over on the Tiki Wiki side. So just promoting a little collaboration here in Barcan. So let me just kind of, let me sort of turn it over to you, Brad, and say, just give your little thumbnail on how you got involved in Wikipedia and what you saw.
So one day I'm sitting in my office not far from here, and I was looking online, and I had gone to Wikipedia all the time. It was one of my favorite little sites. And I had come across this presentation that this guy named Jimmy Wales, or Jimbo, had given on 10 things that should be free. It was a keynote from a number of years ago, and at the Wikimania conference in Germany. And I thought, that's really cool. And I liked it. I'm a big believer in free and open source and so forth. And mind you, I'm sitting in a law firm on the 30 whatever floor. So this was kind of atypical. But the thought crossed my mind, I had no idea where the Wikimedia Foundation was based. I thought, maybe San Francisco, Cambridge, something like that. I punched it up, and it turns out it's at an address over on 2nd Avenue in St. Petersburg, Florida. I said, how are these guys across the bridge from me? And I didn't know that. And they don't have a lawyer from what I can tell. And since I am a litigation attorney by practice and a defense lawyer, I deal with people who get sued more than doing the suing. I was very concerned at that point because Wikipedia in 2005 was still a very young organization, was just starting to get headlines, was just starting to get noticed in the popular press. And it seemed to me that it was only a matter of time before somebody might get the idea that it was a good idea to sue them. And I wanted them to have a face that they could turn to, a phone number they could pick up the phone and call if somebody dropped some legal papers on them. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. I emailed this guy Jimmy and said, hey, let's have lunch. And a few months later, we finally did get to have lunch because Jimmy traveled way too much, still does. But what that gave birth to was the idea that there was a real need both to understand the legal issues associated with something as big and wide open as Wikipedia is, and then second, as an organization that was trying to walk the fine line of being an open and free community at the same time that it was trying to exist as a real not-for-profit. And the mantra that we were working with, and my goal was for them to essentially be the 21st Century MacArthur Foundation. We wanted them to grow up and become the kind of institutional leader in the nonprofit space, promoting free knowledge into the 21st century. And because it's built on the kind of irreducible minimum of what the contributions provide in a wiki environment under that open license, the idea that you're constantly just ever upward, you're trying to just keep building up. So now, in January, Wikipedia will be 10 years old. It will, in the space of 10 years, have gone from not existing, literally being nothing, to having an English Wikipedia of more than 4 million articles. It's 3.4, I think, now, to, across all languages, more than 200 languages, et cetera, all the statistics are just mind-boggling. But in the space of 10 years, you've gone from zero to one of the great achievements in collaboration, online or otherwise. It's truly a remarkable thing when you think about it. So I was very concerned about the threats to that, and the threats come in several forms. There are external threats. People who say, I hate you, I want to take you down, I'm going to sue you, and this kind of thing. There are people who have legitimate beefs about the fact that they were injured somehow. Somebody wrote something really bad about them. Why that's the organization's issue as opposed to an individual editor's issue was what I spent a lot of my time talking about. And then you have internal issues. You have philosophical issues about the direction of the organization. You have very in-depth and passionate views about the way that people should interact around this medium, inclusion, exclusion, and so forth. The number one issue for the past several years has been a BLP, or the biography of living persons. What should you be able to put in an encyclopedia about a person who is alive today? Stems from a big issue that happened with a fellow by the name of John Siegenthaler. In December of 2005, a guy who was one of the real luminaries in the journalism field who had been with USA Today, was accused of having contributed to the assassination of Robert Kennedy, one of his best friends. Completely fraudulent, made up, and eventually tracked down the guy who did it. It was a prank, so forth. But Siegenthaler wrote an editorial in USA Today, just lambasting, I should say, Wikipedia, and it became a very public issue. And as a result, Jimmy and Siegenthaler were online or on CNN and elsewhere debating, and it really put Wikipedia on the map, both for good and for ill. People who said it can't be trusted, people who said, wow, this is really cool, and there's no such thing as bad publicity when you're an up-and-coming website, and we watched our traffic just jump just up into the stratosphere. So by then, I think we were top 25 websites in terms of traffic. And after that incident, we were in the top 20, went to, I think, 19 or 18. But that is kind of the idea behind the real problem, which is how do you address, in an open environment, open wiki environment, what happens when people put stuff in there that they shouldn't? That's wrong. That's simply either intending to be injurious or otherwise. And as technologists and as developers and as people within a community, how do you regulate that? In the sense of turning a dial, in the sense of building something into the software, in the sense of just the management of conflict in that sense. So we had some real interesting questions. The other part was that every now and again you get a phone call from someone that you really didn't expect. One of my favorites was getting a phone call from a gentleman who is obviously English, spoke with a very lovely British accent, who identified himself as serving Her Majesty, and that they had some questions for me. Okay, so where's this going? And the answer is that when you put death threats toward, let's say monarchs on a website, certain folks notice and are very interested in who it was that was doing that. And thus a large question that arose now and again was, who posted that? This invokes a huge conversation about anonymity, the right, if there is one, and depending on where you are, to be able to post and participate in online activity anonymously. What it means if you identify yourself as kittycat654, as opposed to even an IP address, which you can then try to hunt down. But I would share with you that the takeaway with that is that the question of anonymity, whether you believe in it or not, I will simply state that it is relevant the way that the world is today. And I say this as someone who I'm presently involved in the defense of individual IP address people, cable customers who are purported to have downloaded movies. There's ongoing litigation in the District of Columbia, something I'm working on now with the EFF and the ACLU. But from the perspective of, somebody who knew that in some countries, when you got that phone call and they wanted to know who someone was because they said something critical of a leader, that the response was not going to be a nice lawyer letter. The response was not going to be an email or a takedown notice. It was going to be a knock on the door in the middle of the night. And that's serious. And there are real repercussions for real people in some jurisdictions in the world. And the fact that they were finding an expression of freedom, true freedom, an expression of what we consider First Amendment rights, but to be able to comment politically and contribute to articles, both in a sense of intellectual freedom, but political freedom and elsewhere. This little project that started off as just a little encyclopedia had turned into something that was a real platform for change in some parts of the world, and it mattered. So that was something that I had not fully thought through or understood. When I was there, we were still in the beginning of the Google-China relationship, and there was still a lot of unease about what was going to happen with how they stepped in to that country. We've seen what happened on the back end of that. So I would say that from a wiki perspective, the great thing is that anyone can edit, right? So you can click edit, participate, and off you go, and you can help contribute to something fantastic. It might be something that you choose to ignore, it might be something you choose to participate in freely. The fact you can is extremely important, and that freedom should exist for everyone. But it does come with consequences, and you have to be prepared for those. And I think that what we've seen in the recent past year or two, this concept of having articles that in Wikipedia now, which are being rated or protected or giving the last clean version and so forth, are tools that are helping provide a level of reliability, or at least a lack of really unfortunate vandalism and so forth. It is providing a window into what a more reliable, more robust encyclopedia can be for people. One other comment I wanted to mention before I kick to Mark, and that is that we've also seen a tremendous explosion in media. The Wikimedia Commons has just fantastic content in terms of photographs, and now increasing audio and video. And it's wonderful stuff that you should be using yourselves and encouraging your clients to use and your colleagues, because it is free in the sense of free and open. It's there for the taking. You can use it on your album cover. You can use it in your video. You can use the audio tracks to underlie the movie you're making or your students are making. It's really great stuff. So I'm excited to have been a part of it. It's a great organization, and what they're doing now with the resources that they've attracted, the staff they've hired, and so forth is really fantastic.
So let me turn it over. Thanks, Brad. That was awesome. Let me turn it over to Mark. Sort of the you're going to get the two flavors of these wiki communities, because a lot of a lot of what Brad talked about was the content, the organization of content, and how that's exploded. Mark is more on the aggregation of tools, and it's as Mark was saying yesterday, it's I'm probably going to steal your thunder, but more applications in a Tiki than any other open source platform out there. So
well, basically to sort of have a contrast. So what Wikipedia is doing basically it's about knowledge. The main goal is to have free knowledge and to find ways so that it can be shared and propagated. From the Tiki project, we're more about like the central thing is not knowledge. The central thing is tools. So we're building a software. So the end goal is different. Where the end goal of Wikipedia is you go to Wikipedia and you have this great content. When you go to Tiki, the goal is you download the software that you can use in your organization to do whatever you need to do. Of course, there's some overlap because we also have documentation. Wikipedia also has tons of software to support all of this. But that's where the main differences lie. Of course, also the scale of the things are different. Tiki, by open source project standards, is quite big. We're talking about 225 people that have added source code. But Wikipedia is like on a different scale. If you would just take the top 50 websites in the world and just do a correlation of how many people work in each organization of those top 50 websites in the world, you would see that something absolutely bizarre with Wikipedia, because probably all the other top 50 websites, we're talking about places with thousands or tens of thousands of employees. And for the foundation is what, 20, 30, 40 people?
I think they might be up to 60 now, yeah.
So what I'm trying to do with Tiki project is basically but what's similar with both projects is the Wiki way. It's really being very open, having people participating, and what we're trying to do is to have the same type of energy and hopefully size one day, but perhaps that's quite ambitious. But to say, okay, how do we build tools? How do we build? And that could be. And so, I'll give you a contrast. Is like in Tiki, there's a calendar feature. Well, if that's not something that's needed for Wikipedia, well, they're not going to have a calendar feature in the software, because the main goal is Wikipedia. For us, the main goal is whatever people that use Tiki want. So if someone in the community wants to add a calendar, they add a calendar. If someone wants a bug tracker or whatever. So far, where that has led, in fact, is that Tiki today is the open source web application with the most built-in features. Because over 7 years, 225 people are adding features, and then it just accumulates. And we've done pretty a good part of what's possible to do with web technologies in the sense of HTML, PHP, which we use PHP in MySQL. And where we were hitting walls is basically stuff like video conferencing and audio. And for that, we've connected with another open source project called Big Blue Button. So if you combine Big Blue Button, which does audio, video, text, screen sharing, and whiteboard, so it's basically all the live collaboration. And on the other hand, Tiki, which does the offline or asynchronous collaboration. When you combine those two, you basically have an all-in-one package with which you can manage just about any community. So there's other very interesting open source projects out there that are similar to that. One of them would be Drupal. There's also Joomla, and to a certain point WordPress, though it would be also the very big projects.
So let me just turn it over to questions, and for either of these guys. Anybody got questions?
Then I'll jump at once. We need to start calling on people? Well, I have a question for Mark. What kind of feedback do you get from people who are users who have Tiki deployments and then evolve them? Do they use them purely as private wikis, or do they use them more for public purposes?
It's typically more private wikis. So it'll be like intranets, so stuff behind the firewall or protected by a password. People that will use Tiki for more public things tend to be more for classical just website publishing. or it'll be more like a blog type thing where you'll have people commenting on stuff, but it's very clear what's the official content and what's contributed back. So
one of the one follow-up. One of the more interesting deployments of MediaWiki has been by two government agencies you may have heard of. One is the CIA, excuse me, and the other is the Department of State. The State Department loves to use wikis because they have what they call line of sight. So the Secretary of State can say something about a particular issue, create a page, do whatever, and various other folks. It's all there, and it's all traceable, and you know exactly where it came from. But they like to talk a lot, so it works out really well. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, just to Mark, what motivated you, or what made you say, you know what, I'm gonna create an open source application? Did you wake up one day, or is it something that just?
Okay, well, a lot of people think that I created it because I've been involved in the project for a long time, but I'm not the founder. Basically, I was looking for a wiki engine back in 2001, 2002. I was already, actually by then I was using PHP Wiki, but there was not many releases. It wasn't really moving, and I was mostly using PostNuke back then, which was like the big CMS. Some people are smiling in the back, so some people remember. So my cocktail back then was PostNuke, PHP Wiki, and Tutos, which was for groupware, and IMP for webmail. That was my cocktail. And basically, for a living, I was doing e-commerce, and I was involved in many nonprofit associations, and I was on the board of directors. So back in '99, everybody wants a website, so they turned to. There's not a lot of people made websites back then, so I ended up, being allocated like you do our website, and I knew making websites the biggest problem. Well, anyway, for me, it's not so much the content. It started at the technical part, but it's the content. So I didn't want to have to be running after people and translating it and updating it. So I said, I'll set you up with something that you'll have your password and you'll be able to update it. So that's when I discovered PostNuke and the rest, and I set that up, and that worked fairly well. But there was still one lag. I thought in terms of content management, it was pretty good. But there was one lagging problem that I found in associations is, over the years, I tend to be involved for a very long time in associations, and you have people that come and go. And you see always the same mistakes. And I was like, these new people, they're all gung-ho, and they're trying to do something that failed 2 years ago without necessarily, perhaps saying, it failed 2 years ago, but for these reasons, this time we're going to succeed. And I felt there was lots of loss of knowledge, and I didn't know what the answer was until I found a wiki. I had that aha moment like in 2001, said, oh, that's it, that's exactly what we need. That's how we can capture all this knowledge and keep it. Because if you're in the private sector, people tend to be longer in organizations than in nonprofits. But even in the private sector, you'll have this loss. So that's how I got into wikis, and eventually it sort of became the main focus. And I thought it was the most important tool. So then PHP Wiki wasn't really going anywhere. So I hunted around. I tried 40 or 50 different wiki engines, and then I picked Tiki, which I thought what attracted to me is the fact that there was tons of features, even at the beginning. The community was very open. I was just sending suggestions, and people either would get done, or people would say, "Oh, it's a great idea. Well, we'll think about it." And I felt this very open community. I felt a connection to that. The other thing that I liked in Tiki, which I was less comfortable with in the other packages back then, is that this concept that you have core developers and module developers. That was how it worked in PostNuke and PHPNuke. And I didn't really like that distinction. If you participate to the project, you participate to it. And in Tiki, well, it was everybody's on in the same team. And that's something that I liked. And so I just joined Tiki, and eventually I just figured, hey, I'm having so much fun doing this, so why don't I just try to focus this instead of doing e-commerce? And since 2003, basically, I've been doing Tiki full time.
Just going to toss one more thing into it, having just known Mark for really just the last year or so. He's and Brad for the last 3 years. It's just these guys have real deep community organizing sort of sense to them, and their sort of expression comes from, you know, organizing, you know, what they're good at, the technology, the content, that kind of stuff. But it's sort of interesting from a newspaper guy's perspective. You would think an editor in a traditional newspaper sense, you know, there was always this expectation that that editor was a community organizer, but realistically the editor was sort of a wordsmith. And what the new models are is all community organizing. I mean, it took, you know, I mean, ultimately Wikipedia is just a way to organize all this information and same as Tiki Wiki. So it's kind of interesting to sort of, you know, you run into community organizers all, you know, in the right places, but that's the DNA, I think, that makes the stuff good. Joel, you had something?
So, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I read about Wikipedia and they're moving into Wikibooks, and I have to say, and Tiki Wiki, I guess what I'm saying, I'm curious where you guys see the future of both your organizations, particularly as it relates around education and universities. And I think potentially you're both transformative, and I'd like to know what your theory is on how that may or may not occur.
Sure. The Wikibooks has been around a long time, but with very, very limited success. A couple of reasons for that. The biggest is that it's extremely difficult to get people not to start a project, but to complete a project. And by that I mean, and I'm not being cute about it, it's a hard thing to agree to start a project with a final printed definitive goal as your end product and have consensus on that on the front end. What happens is somebody says, hey, let's develop a book about, you know, big cats, which is one of the first ones that was done on Wikipedia. Great little book, perfect for kids, great pictures of, you know, jaguars and stuff. The hard part is when do you call it and say, okay, this is good enough.
It's done.
And we're going to say this is good. So what there is a modular little building block thing that shows different progression to get it to the point where it is, quote, good enough. I will say, as somebody who is absolutely not in any way, shape, or form qualified to speak on it, that when I have spoken with people who are expert in curricular development, in educational psychology, in large states, and so forth, while there is tremendous energy around the idea of creating an open curriculum or creating free textbooks and so forth, which I 100% support, it is such a political hot potato and such a complete revolutionary concept to be going against entrenched interests in the form of textbook publishers, existing curricular, you know, so forth. I will only point at Kansas and say good luck with that. But boy, I hope it works.
Let's do this. We're 2 minutes past our time. We're over in the kitchen by the television set. So if anybody would like to carry this conversation on, we'll be over there for a while. So thank you guys. Thanks, Mark.